Hi everyone, it's Amy, and today I wanted to talk to you about the books I currently have on my TBR. So I have around 40-45 books on my TBR, so I don't want to go through them all in this video, but I will go through them in a couple of categories, and today I wanted to talk to you about my non-fiction. So I read quite a bit of non-fiction, as much as I possibly can, just due to it's an interest of mine. I always want to learn more, and due to my studies being previous in history is a big part of my non-fiction reads. So to start with, I'm going to talk to you about books you've probably seen recently if you've watched my previous videos. They're ones that I have on my short-term TBR, and also ones I bought recently whilst I was in London with Lauren. The first book is The Great Cities in History, edited by John Julius Norwich. So as I've talked about this one before, it's a compilation of essays on various cities in history. Some of them are known today and still exist, some not so known, and some that have faded with time. Really excited to read this, and this is on my short-term TBR, so hopefully I'll get to this one soon. The next book is another one you've seen and is on my short-term TBR, which is Neil McGregor's Germany, Memories of a Nation. This is a cultural history looking at what it is to be a part of Germany and to be part of that nation. And it's, like I said about before, it's full of pictures and photographs, and it's really fascinating. My studies that I talked about before are in cultural history, so this is right up my alley. One book I'm currently reading at the moment is Mao's Great Famine, which is by Frank de Cotta. I think that's how you pronounce it, we'll see. And this is all about Chairman Mao's Great Leap Forward and the famine that arises from that. I talked about this one in my video with Lauren when we did a book haul and currently reading. So I'm currently about 40 to 50 pages in this at the moment. My next book is Philip Springer's A History of a Disappearance, the story of a forgotten Polish town. So I bought this in London recently, as I've talked about, and it's all about the Silesian village of Kupferberg, and it kind of follows that village through many stages of history. So it says here through the 30 Years' War, Napoleonic Wars, World War One, and also post-World War II Stalin era. Yeah, so that's really cool. And the other book that I bought in London is called Ordinary Men, Reserve Police Battalion 101 and the Final Solution in Poland by Christopher R. Browning. So this is all about, it kind of says it in the title, it's all about one police battalion, and it studies the men and why they were driven to create quite horrible acts against the people they met, specifically, and in particular Jewish people, which they tried to eradicate when they travelled around Poland. The next book I have is Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time. I don't really know how much I can talk about this, but this is just a classic work from Stephen Hawking, and it just talks about his theories around time. One question, the first question being here, was there a beginning of time? So it's only a brief non-fiction, and I've had this for a while, so I really should get around to reading this one soon. The next non-fiction I have is The New Wild, Why Invasive Species Will Be Nature's Salvation by Fred Pearce. I have started this one, I'm a little way through it. I'm really bad. I pick up a lot of books, and there's a lot of books on my TBR that have lots of bookmarks or things in them that I started and then put down again. I've talked about this one before because I was going to read this for a readathon, and this is about looking at invasive species, example in Britain, a big one being the grey squirrel, and looking at the positives that can be had from these species and why we should see them in a more objective or kind light than what we usually do. Next book is Your Life in My Hands, a Junior Doctor's Story by Rachel Clark. This is a recent purchase as well. It was a recommendation from a fellow colleague at work. She was reading it and she said it was absolutely fascinating, and actually she went and talked to one of her friends who is in the health service, and it was scaringly accurate apparently, so there's some I guess support for this book in some sense. It's all about what it says, it's all about a junior doctor talking about insights into the National Health Service in Britain, and some of the stories she has to tell about her time there. The next book I have is Why Men Fight by Bertrand Russell. This is kind of a philosophical, political science piece of work, just examining the reasons why men and humankind wish to fight. It's apparently, it says in the back, it's Bertrand Russell's response to the devastation of World War One. I'm reading a lot about World War One recently. I read Storm of Steel not too long ago, so this is a topic of interest for me. The next book I have is The Fall of Yugoslavia by Misha Glenny. This is all about the fall of Yugoslavia, or the war in the former Yugoslavia. I wanted to read more history about places I haven't done a lot of studying around, and one of those being kind of more of the Baltic states and more of Eastern Europe. So this is why I bought that one. The next book I have is a gift from my friend Lauren, and she bought me for, I believe it was either Christmas or my birthday, I can't remember, The Ethical Carnivore, My Year Killing to Eat by Louise Gray. So she bought me this because I am a vegan. I don't know if I've talked about that before. I'm not going to do the classic, I'm a vegan, and then keep going about it, but so she really engaged with it. She's actually converting to vegetarianism slowly but surely, with the end goal to go vegan herself. This isn't necessarily tackling that kind of topic, but it is talking about Louise kind of following the principle of killing what she eats and actually connecting with that process. Really, really interesting to read, but I think it's one of those where, because I have such an issue with the killing of animals, and it's not the easiest subject for me to kind of think about and watch and read, I have been putting this one off, and I think it might take me a while to get around to this, but I definitely will when I'm in the right kind of mood and headspace for this. Next one is Anne Frank's diary, so The Diary of a Young Girl. Yeah, I don't know if I can say much more about this. It's Anne Frank's diary. Yeah. Then we have The Gates of Europe, A History of Ukraine by Serhii Plokhy. I think that's how you say it. Again, this is in the vein of The Fall of Yugoslavia, that book. I want to just learn the history of more countries that I haven't, and Ukraine is another one of those. So, and it's a lovely Penguin non-fiction classic as well, so I like to collect these. Then I have The Story of the Jews, Finding the Words 1000 BCE to 1492 CE by Simon Sharma. So this is, what it is really. It's the story of the Jewish community between those years. So it follows, I've read a little bit of it, it's quite dense, just following kind of, the oppression they've undertaken throughout, most of their history, and just, so it says it spans a millennia and continents, so it goes from India to Andalusia, from Cairo to the streets of Oxford. So quite intense and quite a big breadth of work to get my teeth into. Next one is The Holocaust by Lawrence Rees. This looks bigger than it is. It's not too many pages, there's a lot of notes at the back, but this is just a comprehensive history of the Holocaust from this historian's point of view. I say that just because there's so many different takes and so many different books on the Holocaust that really there's no one definitive text. So this is just one, excuse me, one book covering it from this author's research and standpoint. Yeah. Then I have A History of Scotland by Neil Oliver. I bought this shortly before I moved to Glasgow last September, or no, it was last August. I was looking for a book on the history of Scotland, and this was the one I found. I haven't read it yet, and I have been in Glasgow for coming up to a year now. I've just been away on business for a little bit down south, and unfortunately I'm moving to Stockholm next February. Not unfortunately, I'm really looking forward to it, but I haven't read this yet, and I really should while I'm in the country. So I'll try and tackle this one before February. Then I have A History of the World in 12 Maps by Jerry Broughton, or I think that's how you pronounce it. This is that. It's kind of in the same vein of the Great Histories book. I got these both from my dad last Christmas. So it's just studying the world through 12 maps in history, and so you have, some modern day maps like this, and then you have some really old ones like that one, and it's just using this as a viewpoint to then study history, which I find are really fascinating. So look, that one is completely bizarre, but there's nothing better than a good map, I think. So yeah, when I get around to that one, I think that'd be really interesting. The next book's quite different in that I don't think I will read this cover to cover. It's kind of a reference work. So this is How Not to Die by Michael Greger, and this is a massive book in kind of, especially the vegan community, because Michael Greger is a massive supporter of the vegan lifestyle in terms of its health benefits. So this goes through, it's kind of a two-part process. It goes through how to battle certain ailments, so digestive cancers is in here, infections and so on and so forth, and what to kind of eat to kind of try and prevent those or give you the best chance, because sometimes, you know, life sucks and it really deals you a bad hand. And then it goes through each of the different foods that he recommends, such as berries, beans, etc., and just talks about, you know, what's great about them, how you should be digesting them as well. So I know there's one fact that turmeric's really good for you. I don't know how, but this is one of the things it talks about at the back. It talks about herbs, and turmeric should be digested with the aid of black pepper because it doesn't absorb as readily without black pepper being added to that mix. So it's just lots of things like that, and I don't think this is the kind of book that you would read cover to cover and really enjoy. It's just one of those you'd pick in and out of. So I've yet to do that, but I will do in the future. The next book is The Penguin History of Modern China, The Fall and Rise of a Great Power, 1850 to 2009. This is by Jonathan Fenby. I've probably had this on my TBR for the longest time. I bought this before my undergraduate studies, which would have been in 2011, because I was led to believe that Chinese history would have been on my syllabus, but it was pulled last minute, so I've never really got round to reading this. I've read snippets of it, and it is quite dense, and the font is quite small, so it's quite a beast. I am liking reading about Chinese history. I've read 2 books so far. Well, I'm in the process of my second one, and I feel like they're good. These last 2, so I read Wild Swans, which is a memoir, and I've now reading Mao's Great Famine. I feel like they're really good gateway books to them reading quite a comprehensive history over quite a long span of time. So I will read this eventually, just not right now. Then I have The Iron Kingdom, The Rise and Downfall of Prussia from 1600 to 1947. Again, this is another book I bought for my undergraduate studies. It became slightly useful now and again. I'm also currently reading this, but it's not my current reading on Goodreads, and I've also tabbied when each chapter is, because I really like having chapter goals with non-fiction, especially when it's quite difficult to read, like this one, and that's why I haven't picked it up for about 6 months. Yeah, it's just really dense, and it's also, I don't know, I do enjoy it, and I do enjoy the fact that I'm reading it because it's really new knowledge. I don't know much about Prussian history. A lot of my studies have been in modern history, so I don't know much, but there's a lot to kind of sift through and to understand before you can keep moving on. So it is a trial, and it'd be one of those that would be really good once finished, but at the moment it's kind of, I'm suffering whilst reading it. And the last book on my non-fiction TBR is Vanish Kingdoms, The History of Half-Forgotten Europe by Norman Davies. This is the biggest non-fiction I have on my TBR currently. It's massive, again it's tiny font, and it goes through very similarly again, like the great histories, great cities of history that I talked about earlier. It goes through certain kind of what it calls kingdoms, but certain cities or capitals or kind of regions that were once part of history and now have vanished just due to being absorbed by other countries that we now know. So for example, in here there's Aragon, just filtering in Lord of the Rings for some reason, but Aragon, which was a part of what is now Spain. So that's in there, and there's other things as well. So I read a little bit of this and I really enjoy it because it's nice to be able to digest it one chapter and one kingdom at a time. It's just, I'm very put off by the size of it. So at some point I will get around to this. So there we have it. That is my non-fiction TBR as it stands at the moment. I will be uploading other segments of my TBR, probably do my classics and then I will do other books I have that don't fall into non-fiction or classics. So there we have it. I will see you around in my next video. Bye.